And be part of this weekend seminar focusing on spiritual growth and development in Christ. Last night we were able to listen to two lessons, one on being salt and one on being what? Light. Salt and light, as Christ stated in the book of Matthew chapter 5 verse 13 through verse 16. Brother Ken and his wife Jane, they come from Mesa, Arizona, and they serve the church. Ken is now the assistant minister there. Am I right?
Temporary part-time.
Temporary part-time. All right. So he served the church as well as an elder. He's done mission work for over 20 years in Myanmar and Thailand. Laos,
Cambodia,
lots of places.
Hilo, Arizona.
Okay, so he has a wealth of spiritual experience in the church. He has been a Christian for many years, and he has been married, a family person for many years. We appreciate his experience, his expertise, and his love for the Holy Scriptures. We are going to have the first lesson here with Ken all together. After the first lesson, we will have a break. We'll sing one or two songs, and then the ladies will join Jane in the back room, and the men will stay here with Ken. So we welcome Ken to the podium and to share with us the third lesson. Do you want this on here?
I think I have to wear this thing.
Okay.
Yeah, Daryl said. Oh, good. What would happen if we shut those spotlights off? Let's try it. See how bright the screen is without them. What do you think, gang? Better? Can you all see me? Yeah. Okay, I don't want you to see me this morning anyway. We want to see Jesus, right? All right, good. So that's the theme this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, was growing in maturity. And guess what? I'm not the example. I tried walking on water, and I failed miserably, okay? So this weekend we want to do one thing, and that's to learn to be more like Jesus, okay? And if you're there about 5%, you got a lifetime to work on it. I've been working on it now for 50-some years. I haven't arrived yet, but I'm still working on it every day to be more like the Lord. So that's where we started, growing in maturity. I know you hate my example, but that's one of the best ones I could find of how we need to stand out from the crowd. I don't mean by the way we look or the way we dress, but the way we act, our behavior, our speech, okay? You go to lunch with Linda and Peter, you know what they do? They hand out cards about the Church of Christ to the waitress. And was she insulted? No, she loved it. In fact, we thought she'd be here last night. And that's what Christians do. They walk around with this handful of Church of Christ cards, and they hand them out to everybody with a smile. And that's kind of what we're talking about this weekend. So we can kind of be like this zebra, all right? So we want to think like, act like, and be like Jesus. Or as Peter says, let's grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus. Not who this guy from Arizona is going to talk about, but what he's going to point us to the Master. So last night we talked about salt. We understand seasoning and preservatives and being a disinfectant. We had scriptural examples for all that and how that works out in not only the life of Jesus, not only in the New Testament, but also in our life. And then we talked about light. And Jesus said, all of you are salt and all of you are light. And what kind of light was that? He said the kind that folks can look at and see. Remember now, light only has existence when it has a receptor, like our eyes. So when we talk about Jesus saying, see your good works, it wasn't that word agathos, which is just good, but it was this word kalos, okay? So it was a deed that was more than just being good. It was beautiful and attractive and generous and useful. And so I told you about that night that Kevin and Catherine, what's their names? Carson, thank you. All right, when they came to Mesa on a Wednesday night, not Sunday, but on Wednesday night, and the church threw a dinner for them, and we had 150 people, like this hall would be filled, and the dinner was put on by one lady. And it was an awesome meal with all kinds of exotic desserts. And I think she qualified for what? Kalos. Nancy Singleton is our preacher's wife. And she just mentioned one day that these folks came to church and their car broke down, and they were really in distress and they needed a set of wheels. And they just got a new Sable. I don't know what a Sable is. Is that a Chevy or Ford or some kind of car? And so Nancy took the keys for this new Sable and gave it to them so they could use, so they'd have a car to take care of their sick mother. I think that would qualify for what? Kalos. These are the keys to a brand new Kia minivan parked out in your parking lot. I didn't realize that you Canadians were so backward. When I got the car, they gave me 2 sets of keys on the same ring. You know, in America, we just get 1 set of keys on 1 ring. But y'all are just special. I don't know how they do that. So you think about Kalos, these things, okay? John Camp is another one of our members. He was a missionary down in Taiwan for 5 years. And they stayed in a 6-story apartment house. And on the 5th story was a grandmother that couldn't walk. And so for her to get from the 5th story down to the 1st story, no elevators in Taiwan back then, how do you do that? Well, you walk. How does a crippled grandmother get down 5 flights of stairs? John carried her. I think that was not agathos, but kalos. Yeah. Marie, I wish I had her picture. When we got kicked out of Laos back in 1998, there was a little girl about 3 years old. Her name was Marie, and she was a terror. I mean, she was the kid that tore up everything. You know, she's the one that you hated to see come to your house because you know what's going to happen. Marie now is 20 years old, and she got a government scholarship in communist Laos to go study in Vietnam. So she got the scholarship, that takes care of tuition, that takes care of her dorm, but how do you get there from Laos? And so they wrote on email if some of the folks would be glad to help. And one of the attorneys in our congregation wrote out a check. He didn't know Marie. Marie's just this faithless Laotian girl, wants to go to better herself. She's a Christian. Mom and Dad were Christians. Dad lost his faith. He was in jail with us, and he quit the church. But Mom was faithful all these years. So Marie wanted to go to university, and guess what? Somebody wrote a check for the expenses. I think that would probably be what? This word, kalos. So somebody asked me last night, did you mean I have to do exotic things like taking a pitcher of precious ointment and anoint Roy's head like that lady did for Jesus? Is that the kind of kalos? No. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about those things that we do as Christians that nobody else knows about. It's just me and the Lord. No name, no attraction, no blinking lights, no sounding horn. Just what? Just something that you do, like taking your new car and loan it to these folks. Nobody knows about that except you and Jesus, and I told you about it this morning. So now how do we apply salt and light? That's what we talked about last night. So what did Paul mean in Philippians 2? Prove yourselves. That means get into the laboratory and test it. Make sure it works, all right? To be blameless and innocent, children of God above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. So we're going to shut off the lights, get it dark in here, and see how many of us glow. Is that what he's talking about? No. We want to see what? We want to see that behavior. We want to see those good works. So back in 1957, the first missionary from the Church of Christ went into Thailand, started the church in Bangkok. They call it Soi Si. And this is that congregation now. So they, I think they're probably salt and light. Then about 10 years ago, that congregation slid off into another congregation, Watch Report, and I think they probably qualify as salt and light. 41, 42 years ago, Gim Veriscu, Gim is right there. He graduated from Sunset, graduated from Oklahoma Christian with a degree in chemical engineering, came back to Thailand as a missionary and started the church in this little desert town of Kongan. And now they've got a congregation this size after 40-some years, salt and light. The church in Vientiane, the one that was arrested back in 1998. Everybody in the picture back then was arrested. I think they're salt and light. El Salvador, down in South America, Central America, we've got a congregation there that we help with. I think they qualify as salt and light. Mesa, Arizona, where we're from, salt and light. And I wish I had your picture to show up there, but guess what? Was it Daryl that told me that we can't take your picture and put it up on if it's public, because I'll get arrested here in Canada. So I snuck a picture last night. When I get back to the States, where they can't get me, I'll do it, okay? Daryl, you heard that. And there's the Fox family about 4 years ago. Are they salt and light? Or are they pepper and what? Fireworks. Yeah, some of those are a little fireworky. So our challenge today is, how do we apply this salt and light business, okay? How do we get like that young man, maybe he's not that young, in Taiwan, back in June the 5th, back in 1989, to stop that row of tanks? What would it take for me and for you to have the courage, have the conviction, be the salt and the light, that we could stop something like those tanks that day? So what do we have to change? Now, I'm not sure which one of those pictures is you. When you get that phone call, is that the way you act? Or is this us? Is this our image of us? Faster than a speeding locomotive. Able to jump tall buildings because we're super Christian. I doubt that any of us think of ourselves like that. But unfortunately, Fox is still trying to deal with some of this kind of junk, okay? So what do we have to do? How can our faith change? How much do we have to study the Bible? How many scriptures do we have to go to? How many times do we have to attend church before we're able to have this kind of conviction, this kind of faith, to do what? To stop that row of tanks. So let's think like Jesus this morning. Is this world tasteless? Is this world in darkness? Well, I took the challenge this morning. I stopped in the hotel again and I got the morning paper. How much salt and light you think's in here? Shall I read it to you? Ooh, girls, cars, food, nightclubs, and a little bit of news. Oh, and hockey. Was there a guy named Wayne something or other around here? Gretzky. You know where he went when he left Canada? I think somewhere he went to the Phoenix Coyotes. That's down there where I live. So you all can throw rocks at me. I don't know if that was good or bad. I understand now he's back, but he was one of our heroes. Yeah. Could he stop tanks? No, he could sure play hockey. Wow. So this world is what? This world is just what Jesus said. Needs some salt and needs some light. And the challenge this morning is to look at the world like Jesus did. Have his worldview, and so we need to talk about that. What is a worldview? It's a person's mental concept, the big picture of reality, okay? It's what we have in our subconscious or our conscious. It's asking those three important questions. Where did you come from? Why are you here? And where are you going? Now, based on your worldview, you have different answers for those. If you believe in evolution, if you believe in reincarnation, then when somebody asks those questions, where'd you come from, why are you here, where are you going, you've got a completely different answer than Jesus did. And so that's what we want to talk about with our worldview, okay? And there's a lot of choices here in this world. We can be deism, theism, mysticism, postmodernism. We got all these isms I can't even pronounce, you know. And that, again, is different people's worldviews. And I think you've got some of that up here in Canada. When we deal with the folks in Buddhist Thailand, where 96% of the people are Buddhist, they're really big into reincarnation, this recycle of death, birth, and rebirth. And of course, Americans just love evolution. We all came from the monkeys. You know, my great uncle was a chimpanzee, all that junk, okay? But again, that gives us a different worldview than Jesus had. So let's see if we can figure that out, okay? Which worldview helps us think like Jesus? And you've all seen the picture of the iceberg. You know, what's under the surface is so much greater than what's on the surface. And so what's under the surface in our mind is our worldview, our beliefs, our values, and then that is reflected in how I answer the phone when it's my mother-in-law. Or it's when they call me at 3 in the morning and say, hey, the baptistry is overfilling or at the church building. You ever had that happen, Roy? Oh, we don't have a baptistry here. Whew, we're safe. Okay, we don't have that one. So here's the worldview according to the Americans that live in the United States. And I want you to see if we can't make you mad. Look at Canada. Does that help you to know a little bit about the worldview of my countrymen, okay? And if you've heard Donald Trump, if you've seen any American news, we're going to make America great again. Oh, huh? Well, what about us folks that live in Canada? Aren't we in North America? And the folks that live down in Mexico, well, what about us? Aren't we? And so, you know, what kind of worldview is this? Well, that means that, you know, I'm the most important person around, and you all are just something else, okay? And so the folks down in Mexico do our laundry and our lawns, okay? Coffee comes from down in South America. Down here in Australia, that's where the zoo animals come from. The kangaroos come, is that New Zealand or is that Australia? Okay. And this Eastern Europe is all communist, okay? And of course all the Muslim countries here are where the evildoers are. And what's China? Well, they make all our stuff, okay? So all our stuff says made in China. Whose worldview is that? It's not yours. In fact, you're probably ready to rip my ears off. And where's Santa Claus? Oh, he's up here. And of course your neighbors up here in Alaska, they're more of America. The worldview according to my countrymen, not your countrymen. So you get the idea of this worldview, how that affects our thinking, our conscious and our subconscious. What's this worldview? That's the White House. That's where our president works, has for 7 years, and he's got another 11 months or 10 months left. So when they have these great lesbian gay parades and holidays and all these holidays, guess what our president does? He decorates the White House in the gay and lesbian colors. That's not my worldview. That's not your worldview, but that's obviously his worldview. Now, he doesn't do that for Christmas. He doesn't do that for Easter. He doesn't do that for the 4th of July, but for an LBJT, XYZ, whatever that word is they use for gay, lesbian, he decorates the White House for that. That's a worldview. Now let's get down to where we live. The dog on the left, kind of cute. So in America, we have this society, these folks that are just dedicated to animals, pets, cats. You know, their life thrives on our house has a little poodle, 7 pounds, named Fifi. Okay. But Fifi doesn't have a soul. I don't know if you knew that or not. Gene's not sure, but I'm pretty convinced Fifi doesn't have a soul. So Fifi's a dog, okay? And so in America, we have folks that just love dogs. So don't let the criminals harm more innocent victims. You can help save lives of what? Not babies, not the kids, not humans, but what? Dogs and cats. That's America. I don't know about Canada, but that's America. Now on the right is northeast Thailand, where Gene and I spent some 20 years. And so here we have a whole semi full of dogs. I mean, every kind of dog you can think of. They go out in the villages and round them up. What are they going to do with those dogs? No. You would eat Fifi? I can't believe you said that. Would you people actually eat dogs? I mean, if you say this in Maize, Arizona, they'll hang you. We just don't do that with dogs. But I'll guarantee you in northeast Thailand, wow, that's good. Vietnam, yummy, yummy, yummy. I was teaching in Congo in Thailand, and we've got 5 or 6 Laotian students there in the Bible school. And we had this cat. Every night was out meowing, and howling like cats do when they're in heat or doing something. And I said, guys, what are we going to do with that? And they said, hey, if you don't mind, we'll eat it. And sure enough, the next day the cat was gone. They said, cat is really good. What's the worldview? I hope I didn't upset you all. But some people in the world eat dogs. So Gene, watch Fifi, okay? Take care. So thinking like Jesus is going to have to change my worldview. I've got to look at the world like Jesus does. Develop this biblical worldview, okay? So as we mentioned in the Beatitudes, That summarizes everything Jesus taught us in about 12 verses, okay? And that's really the life of Jesus in a nutshell, condensed version, okay? So if we're going to be like Jesus, as we're talking about this weekend, then we'll be salt and light to the earth and to the world. So that being the case, here's what Jesus said. Being poor in spirit, having the right attitude, being meek, hungry and thirsting for righteousness, being merciful, having a heart that's pure, desiring to be at peace with all men. And then if we have climbed all those steps, then we'll have the attitude, the willingness to be persecuted for righteousness' sake. And the top of the hill is what? Happiness, that Max Lucado called sacred delight when he wrote his book on the Beatitudes about 20 years ago. So that's the 12 verses of the Beatitudes. And how does that work out? Well, this is Tim Carlin. We met Tim 30, 40 years ago, had small kids. He wasn't really interested in the Lord. He'd come to church with Cheryl, but he'd sit in the pew. Had 3 or 4 kids, raised them. He became a professional welder, pipe fitter. Best at his trade. He does all the exotic stuff. Tim is now retired. You know where he's going in July? He's going back to run the Ship of Life for 3 more months. What happened to Tim that before he was just disinterested in Jesus and now he's just on fire? He's about 67. He spent 3 months on the Ship of Life last year, and now this year he's going back for another 3 months. What would make a guy like him leave? He's got a mother. His mom just passed away. Cheryl's mom is feeble, but they're going to leave mom. They've got kids and grandkids, and maybe soon they'll have great-grandkids. Why do you leave those folks at home and go for 3 months overseas to a place that eats rice, eats dog? What's your worldview got to be that would change our lifestyle so much like Kevin and Catherine? So it's not enough just to believe in Jesus. We got to learn to think, and then we think, then we begin to act like Jesus would. Lauren Hollingsworth, that some of you know, you meet him in Cambodia. He goes there and teaches every year. He's probably the walkingest Bible I've known in my life, except for Richard Rogers. Lauren has a wheat farm in Kansas. He was raised farming, growing wheat. He loves it. Man, to get on that tractor, get on a combine and work in the wheat field, he just loves it. But the wheat field is in Kansas, and he's where today? He's in Thailand teaching the Bible today. He may be in Cambodia when some of us get there. Why would he do that? What's his worldview? His worldview is that Kansas wheat fields are good, but what's better is teaching the gospel to folks in Asia that don't know a thing about Jesus. Think, live, and be like Jesus. But wait a minute, you said, well, I don't have a Kansas wheat field. Wait a minute, I'm not an pipe fitter, I'm not an expert welder. So how does that affect me? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's see if we can get into that. Where do all these books come from? Let this mind be in you. Think like Jesus. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Somebody's been trying to think about this for a long time. How can we be like Jesus? How can we act like Jesus? How can we think like Jesus? So very quickly in the next, let's see, Roy, let's make sure I don't run over. Gene will kill me. All right, I got 10 minutes. We're going to speed read 18 ways to be like Jesus, okay? So we can think about what Jesus would do, and then to keep calm and think what Jesus would do when we get in those situations. So first of all, as we think like Jesus, we've got to turn our thinking upside down. When I worked for the company, U.S. Gypsum, and then later I worked for National Gypsum, we had one goal in management, and that is to get what? To be king of the mountain. Yeah. I mean, when I got to be a foreman, what did I want to be? I wanted to be a superintendent. And when I got to be a superintendent, what did I want to be? I wanted to be the assistant plant manager. Then when I got to be the assistant plant manager, what did I want? I wanted to be the plant manager. And when I got to be plant manager, guess what? I got the company car. I got to wear a tie and suit to work in northern Michigan, where nobody else had a tie and suit on except Ken Fox. Guess who's arrived? King of the mountain. Isn't that what life is all about? Who gets, just get up there, okay? But Jesus said what? The way up is down. If you want to be the the boss, you have to be the servant. Wow, that just completely upsets our thinking. That isn't what we teach our kids in school. That isn't what we do in our government. Everybody wants to be president. If you don't believe it, ask Donald Trump. Wow! So maybe the Church of Christ looks like this. Maybe it's upside down from the rest of the world. Maybe it doesn't work like it does in business. How can we have the integrity of Jesus? The Lord in Matthew 4 challenged, turn these rocks into bread. Jump off this temple. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. So all the easy ways to get food. Jump off that temple. Give you the kingdom, the powers of the world, okay? So how can we be pure? How can we have the integrity? How can we stand on those challenges that come? I was running this gifting plant in northern Michigan. Every company party, we always had booze. I mean, that's what companies do. You know, we have liquor. Except all of a sudden when this clown from Arizona comes up and he runs the plant, guess what? We don't have any booze during the company activities. There's no liquor. There's no free bar. Until the vice president from Charlotte, South Carolina comes. North Carolina, yeah. And he came to our supervisor's meeting that night, and he said, Ken, where's the booze? Where's the bar? I said, we don't have one. Ken, I'm vice president. Open the bar. What do? You open the dumb bar. I mean, he's paying my salary. But that's where this question of integrity comes. What happens when we get challenged like that with what we believe is right? How do you obey like Jesus did? Remember in Luke 2, chapter 2, he's in the temple. He's 12 years old, and he's dealing with these folks. But who's he obedient to? Mom and Dad. Remember in John 2, the wedding of Cana? Who gives Jesus the request to change the water to wine? Mom does. And what does Jesus do? He's still obedient to Mom. Wow. I wonder how that would affect us if we learn to obey like Jesus did. In John 17, he's in the garden. He knows what's coming. And his prayer is what? Not my will, but thy will be done. And so we think about our prayer life. We think about God's strength. We think about what Jesus did that surrendered to God's will. And then continuing that surrender. And then knowing what's in the future. So again, as we talk this weekend about being Jesus, to have the prayer life, the prayer attitude that the Lord had. And then to change my speech to talk like Jesus, okay? Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night, and you know the story. You know what happened. We talked about being born again. And you know Nicodemus' worldview, well, that can't happen, stupid. You have to go into my mother's womb the second time. Jesus, in the next chapter, meets the woman at the well. And because us Jews don't talk to Samaritans because they're what? They're worse. They're the most low-life people on earth. But Jesus does what? He talks to that woman. Wow. How could I learn to talk like Jesus did to people that don't look like me and don't speak my language? You go to Thailand as a new missionary and learn their language. You think English is fun, but how many letters do we have in our alphabet? 26 last time I counted. Thailand has 76 letters in the alphabet. Yeah. And their stupid language is tonal. So if you say the wrong word, it gets you in trouble. So you're a new missionary and you're preaching about picking up your cross and follow me. And man, you're really getting into it. You're really slobbering and just really getting out there. And you say, pick up your pants and follow me. And everybody's snickering. And you may want to pack up and go home. We've got to do what? Learn to talk like Jesus did. And maybe talk with other folks like Jesus did. Folks that are not like us. Folks that don't have our culture. Folks that don't have our language. Jesus talked to Nicodemus. Jesus talked to the woman at the well. And you notice he always asked questions. Jesus was always asking questions. And they provoked those questions. And then every time he met somebody, he always used that occasion like Linda and Peter do. They've embarrassed me handing out cards to waitresses all the time. Do you all do that? At the end of our session today, we're going to hand out everybody 50 cards. You get rid of them by 10 o'clock tonight. Wouldn't that be a challenge? Linda, could you do that? Yeah, I think you could. Yeah. Just every time we meet people, follow what Jesus did. Everything he did, he used as a tool to bring up a discussion. At the well, we're talking about living water. Wow. And Jesus was never in a hurry. He always took time for all those folks, and he stayed on message. And then I've got to master this one to learn to be angry like Jesus did. You walk into the temple, and you're making a trash dump. You're making a Walmart. You're making a 7-Eleven out of my Father's house. And so what do? He throws them out of the temple. I wonder if I could have that kind of righteous indignation about all the religious junk that we get into. Our ladies' class had a guest speaker last week, and she was talking about memorials. And so she brought in the communion service, and she had the grape juice, and she had the unleavened bread, and she had all the ladies religiously do the Lord's Supper on a Tuesday morning. And some of the sisters said, "What's this Lord's Supper on Tuesday bit?" And the teacher said, "Well, you know what Jesus said. You know what Paul said. As often you do this in remembrance of me. So we're going to do it on Tuesday morning." Well, there's a lot of folks that do it on Saturday night. What's wrong with that? So when we run into those challenges to what we believe is either tradition or scriptural, then if we're like the Lord, we need to what? Maybe have some feelings about what the book says and about what we believe. The man with the wildered hand said to Jesus, and the Pharisees are out there watching and say, hey, is he going to do it on the Sabbath or not? Let's learn to pray like Jesus. When people came to Jesus, when a blind man came to Jesus, the blind man said, "If you're willing, you can." And guess what? Jesus did. Jesus is in the garden by himself. Agony. He knows what's coming. So his prayer was praise, his prayer was surrender, his request, his forgiveness and protection. And then they forgive like Jesus. Remember, they lowered the guy down in the roof, and instead of healing, he says, "Son, your sins are forgiven you." And the Pharisees are all saying, "Hey, nobody can do that. That's not your deal." Forgiveness, you're on the cross. You're in agony. You're torment. Father, forgive them. I don't know that I'm up to that this morning. Do you? I can barely handle my wife. On a morning, we got a lot to do. And everybody, we got to be down there by 9:30, and Roy's going to have the building open, and then, we got to get you set up, and we got to do this, and how do you deal with your mates and your brethren when things are stressed? Do you have the Spirit of Jesus? Can we be forgiving like him? I'm failed that one miserably. How to be humble like Jesus when he meets tax collectors, when he deals with the widow's mite? That's still one of my challenges. How do we develop the attitude that Jesus had of being humble? The first should be last, and the last should be first. The boss should be the servant. The way up is down. How do you get that attitude? I never got it from National Gypsum Company. I never got it from the U.S. Gypsum Company. I never got it in the University of Arizona where I went to college. I never got that. But I did get it in the Church of Christ in Mesa, Arizona. We had some elders that were awesome. The guy was a EE, electrical engineer. He worked for the U.S. Navy. He designed radar systems for the government. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's the guy you could call. That's the attitude I want. When you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, look out, okay? I ain't there yet. How to love like Jesus. The man that was in the tombs, chained, he had demons that were legion. How do you handle people like that? And Jairus comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, my daughter is sick, will you come?" And so Jesus said, "Okay, let's go." And on the way, this woman that has this hemorrhagic problem, been that way 12 years, she touches Jesus' garment, and all these people are around, and we're trying to get over here to Jairus' house so we can take care of the daughter. This woman's bothering me. How do you deal with people when they come and bother you like that? And you get rid of her, and then you get to the house, and they say, hey, well, she's dead already. And Jesus said, no, she's not dead, she's sleeping. And what do those people do? They laugh at him. What's your attitude when folks treat you like that? I'm afraid I haven't graduated to love yet like Jesus does. And you know what the Greek says about love? Storge and phileo and eros and then agape. You know, that first one is the relationship in our family, then between our friends, and then the things that we consider beautiful. And all three of those are based on feelings and affection. What's in your heart? And then agape is what? Based on a decision of will and not on feelings or emotions. It's a commitment to love the unlovable. Like the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. Are you there yet? This is yes. This is no. And this is I'm still under construction, okay? That's me. And then enduring like Jesus. You know, in John 5, when that man at the temple, 38 years old, been crippled since birth. How do you put up with what folks do and deal with you? In John 8, when the woman's taken in adultery, you know they brought her to him to test him, trying to find what's wrong. How do you endure people? How do you put up with the brethren? I've been a member at Mesa off and on since 1979. How many years is that? How do I put up with them? They've changed preachers I don't know how many times. They've had new elders. I've been an elder there 3 times. I'm so sick and tired of them. Is that the attitude I should have? You just think about putting up with the brethren. If you don't like putting up with us, you ought to try some other places. You know, enduring people like Jesus did. Wow. And then grieving like the Lord did. He got news that his cousin John had been beheaded. He goes off to be by himself. He comes in a deal with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And actually in John 11:35, one of the few passages you find that Jesus wept. How do you grieve like the Lord did? Grief is inevitable, painful, baffling. It's a process. It's a purposeful experience. How do we do that like Jesus did? And how do we run out of time like Fox does? Yep, we're going to do it. Okay, real quickly, and then we're done. Learning to lead like Jesus, focus on life like Jesus did, be courageous like Jesus when they come and test you and said, hey, whose coins like these? And Jesus said, do what? Render unto Caesar, those that are Caesar's, render unto the Lord, that which is the Lord's. Serving like Jesus, washing whose feet, and then learning to die like the Lord did, conquering like the Lord did, and how to be spiritual like Jesus was. And then you might want to add number 19 to your list of how to be like Jesus. So how do we stop tanks this morning? Good question. The Church of Christ that tastes like salt. Our brother came up this morning and said, boy, I feel kind of salty this morning after what you said last night. Well, good. Mission accomplished. The Church of Christ that lights up the world. So 18 ways that we can live like Jesus. I'll give you a test in just a few minutes. Our next section is how to think like Jesus. We're going to take the break now because I'm 5 minutes over time. You all forgive me. That was number 3. You know. No, seriously. The ladies' class will be after the break. And you all are in for real treat. I wish I could go to the ladies' class. She's going to talk about living with me for 55 years. Wow. All right. Break time.
Thank you for listening to the lesson. And we hope you were blessed and challenged by the Word of God. The South Edmonton Church of Christ meets at the Southwood Community Center in Millwoods, Edmonton, Canada. Our location is 1880 37th Street Northwest. Our phone contacts are: in Canada, you can call us at 780-902-1329. For those living outside of Canada, you can call us at 321-220-7519. Our meeting times on Sundays are as follows. 10 a.m. Bible class for all ages. 11 a.m. we meet for worship, to break bread, to have the communion, to remember the death of Christ. We sing, we pray, we give of our earnings as God has prospered us, and we fellowship one with another. Always remember, at the churches of Christ, a warm welcome awaits you.